Hi everyone, thank you so much for your Maravilla Maker Kit purchase. Alvaro and I hope that you have a great time with your kit. Please make sure to tag us in your pictures and use hashtag Maravilla Maker. In this video, I will be showing you how to make your own snowman ornament. Let's get started. Okay everyone, so first thing, we're going to go through all of our components in our kit. The first thing you're going to see is a little plastic container with some cornstarch. This is what we're going to use to make sure that our clay isn't very sticky and so our cutters come out easily. Next, you should see two 12-inch pieces of red ribbon. This kit has enough material for you to be able to make two ornaments, so we've given you two separate pieces of ribbon, and I'll show you how to work with that at the end. You're going to see your clay. So you should have 4 different colors of clay. You have your white clay, your black, your red, and your orange. And I'm going to go ahead and leave that on our work surface because we'll be using it very soon. Next, you'll see a roller. This has been cut out exactly to fit the other components, your 3D printed components. So you should find one of these in your box. You should also find a skewer. We'll be using this throughout our ornament making process to clean up edges and also to help with little details. And then let's take a look at the 3D printed components. So you should find a big spacer. This is a 2.5 millimeter spacer. And again, it works perfectly with your roller. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into our ornament making process. You should see a snowman cutter with a snowman top hat cutter as well, and a small little round cutter that's going to be used to cut the circle out on the hat so that you can string your ribbon through. And the last thing that you should find in your kit are 2 sheets of parchment paper. So I know if this is your first time working with polymer clay, you might not have a tile to work on. And so these are great to use because you won't have to transfer your work. You'll be able to put this on a baking sheet and bake it immediately. And so I'll be working on one of these as well, so that I'm having the same experience that you are. So go ahead and leave one of those sheets on your work surface. Let me just reorganize this stuff really quick. All right, so the first thing that we need to do is to condition our white clay. Now, polymer clay needs to be conditioned. It needs to be softened for it to work properly. And the easiest way to do that is to roll it first. You can also squish it in between your hands to condition it, to warm it up. But the best way to do this is to roll it between your palms until you have more of a log. The other thing that I want to note is you want to make sure you have clean hands when working with white clay. So now once you rolled your clay into more of a log, you're going to fold it in half and then you're going to give it some twists. Now this is just going to help you condition it much faster because you're actually mixing in the clay as well. And then roll into a log again. White clay can be tricky to work with because it will collect lint and just things on your work surface, and that's totally fine. All right, so now we have a log again. I'm going to fold in half again and do some more twisting. And you want to do this until the clay feels nice and pliable. It's never going to get like super soft, but you do want it to be able to stretch without breaking. So we're getting closer to that. So go ahead and fold it again, twist, and roll. And the great thing about working with clay is that you can always put it back together and do it again if something, goes terribly wrong. I'm going to twist a couple times. I think we're getting pretty close. And this time I'm just going to fold it, roll it into a thicker log, and then fold it again. And now, since my clay is nice and soft, I'm just going to start pressing it to make it flat to get it ready to roll out. The flatter you get it, the better. But obviously, we're going to be using that spacer to get that perfect width. So it's nice and even all the way through. That looks pretty good to me. Hope you can see that there. Okay, so now we have our clay nice and conditioned. Go ahead and place your 2.5 millimeter spacer over your parchment sheet. Now, there is enough clay here to make 2 ornaments. So I suggest to cut out maybe a third of it. You won't need that much when you're rolling out. So I just ripped off a third of that clay, and I'm going to put that to the side. That can be used for my second ornament. I'm just going to flatten this a little bit more. If you notice, our ornament cutter or snowman cutter is almost there, but we obviously want this to be nice and even. So go ahead and place it in towards the bottom, but still pretty centered, on your parchment sheet. Then you're going to grab your roller. And the thing with the roller is you want to use it slowly. Don't apply too much pressure. If you're applying a lot of pressure as you're rolling, your clay will become very sticky and it will stick to your roller. It's just going to be more, a little bit more work working with your roller. So nice and even pressure, and light pressure is always best because you can always roll out slower. All right, so we have our clay here. It's towards the bottom of my parchment sheet, but still pretty centered. You want to start with placing the roller in the center of the piece of clay and then rolling towards you. Okay. Next, now you'll see you might get some tackiness. Just go ahead and wipe that as you're working if it gets a little bit sticky. Start in the center again, and now we're going to peel away. If you get the parchment curling up a little bit, that's totally fine. Just maybe ease off the pressure a little bit. Now we're going to do this again, and we're going to repeat this process until this is nice and flat. So now we're going to finish by just making sure all of it is nice and smooth. Don't be afraid to readjust your roller as you're moving, right? So making sure that it's always over the two edges so that it's nice and even. All right, that's looking pretty smooth to me. I'm going to go ahead and just place my roller to the side and lift the spacer off. We won't be needing that anymore. Okay, so now you should have a pretty smooth piece of white clay. Next, you're going to want to grab your cornstarch. Now, cornstarch is great to work with polymer clay because it helps to mattify the surface so that your cutter comes off clean. So what we're going to do is grab a little bit on your finger, and you're going to rub it on top of the clay to get a very thin layer. So you should be able to feel where it's matte and where it's sticky. That just means the sticky places are spots where you haven't gotten any cornstarch on yet. And the matte places, matte spots, are where you have cornstarch already. So work with just a little bit at a time. You don't want to have a mountain of cornstarch on your clay until the whole thing is matte. Okay. I'm going to put that to the side, and then go ahead and clean up your parchment so you don't have lots of extra cornstarch here and there, okay? That looks pretty good. Next, you want to grab your snowman cutter and choose a spot towards the bottom of the parchment. So this is the entire sheet of parchment. I'm going to go ahead and go as far down as I can go and press down firmly, making sure you get all of the edges, all of the corners, all of the sides. Okay, now you want to hold down your parchment paper, hold down the rest of the clay to make it easier, and wiggle that out. And that's what you should have. Next, you're going to peel the rest of the polymer clay, and it should look like this. Now, just because we've got cornstarch on it doesn't mean that we can't use it. That's totally fine. Go ahead and form it into a ball, and you can add it to the other scrap that you have, and this will give you enough clay to make another snowman ornament if you'd like. All right, we're gonna put that to the side. You should have your little snowman ornament just like this. Now you'll notice that the edges are a little bit messy. So that's okay. That happens because we just get some clay behind when we're using the cutter. So we're going to use our skewer to clean the edges before we do anything else. So go ahead and grab that handy dandy skewer and take the time to clean all of the edges. So take your time to do every single side, making sure it's nice and clean, because this will make your ornament look nice and smooth once it's done baking. Check all the corners, and once you're happy with that, we can move on to the next part. So this is what your snowman should look like. We cleaned up all those edges there, so they're not there anymore. So it's nice and clean. All right, now you notice I can see a little bit of cornstarch on it, so we can just wipe that away. That's totally fine. We're gonna keep working on the snowman. All right, so we have our little snowman body done. Next, we're going to work on the hat. So if you don't have a space like this on your parchment that you're working on, you can always use your extra piece of parchment paper, but I should have enough room. So next we're going to work on the black clay for the hat, and we're gonna use our spacer. But again, we have to condition our clay. You won't need this much clay for the hat, so if you want, you can go ahead and break off a piece to only use half. You'll also notice that your hands might get a little bit stained with the black or all of the colored clay. So as you're working, just make sure to take a look at your hands. Feel free to wipe them with a paper towel or wash them as you're working. All right, so since we have such a small piece of black clay, I'm just pressing it in between my fingers to flatten it out. And this black clay is going to be a lot easier to work with because there's just so little of it. So go ahead and just flatten that out. And then fold it in half and keep flattening it out. Do it again. Flatten out. And you should start feeling that it feels softer and more pliable. You want to repeat this process a couple more times till it's nice and soft. So a good indicator with polymer clay once it's ready to work with is that you don't get tears when you fold, right? So you see that there's no tears on the folded edge, and that means that it's nice and pliable and ready to work with. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to leave my piece like this. And again, I'm placing my piece of black polymer clay on the top part away from my snowman. Bring back your spacer and place it on the parchment paper. Okay. Now you want to be careful that you don't damage your little snowman, so just work slowly here. Make sure to clear up your area. And grab your roller once more. This is going to be a lot faster to do just because it's a smaller piece of clay. We've already flattened a lot of it. But either way, rock back and forth very slowly. If your parchment is peeling up, that's okay. See how my piece of clay just got stuck? I'm gonna go ahead and place it down the other way and give your roller a wipe. You'll see that all the excess clay is kind of coming off. That's totally fine. Okay. Oh, I've got a little piece there, but it's all right. All right, so let's go ahead and try that again. We're rolling back and forth very slowly, applying light pressure only until we get a nice flat surface. We're actually almost there. It's looking pretty flat and feeling pretty flat already. And I'm making sure that as I'm rolling, again, I'm on the edges of my spacer and that I'm protecting my little snowman. All right, that looks good to me. Okay, now we're gonna do the same thing. So go ahead and remove your spacer, put that to the side, grab your handy dandy cornstarch and start applying a very thin layer slowly. Now the black is really gonna show you how this works. It'll be a lot more visible. You'll see that as you're working the cornstarch in, you get this matte look, and you'll also be able to see it. But even if you get rid of all of it, you'll see that one side is matte. This is matte, and this is more shiny and sticky. That's because we only have cornstarch here and not here yet, and it's sticky to the touch. So grab a little bit more, work slowly. Again, you don't want to have a mountain of cornstarch on your polymer clay. And then you can brush off the excess. Just like that. All right. Now you want to grab your little hat cutter and we're going to cut out our hat. Just like this. Go ahead and hold down your parchment and your clay and carefully remove your cutter. Then you can peel away the excess clay. You see how we didn't even use not even half of this. All right, so you can squish this back up, put it to the side for your next ornament. Go ahead and place it there. All right, so next we're going to use our skewer to clean up our edges again. As I'm cleaning, you'll notice I'm grabbing the tip and removing what's there, putting it to the side, because if you don't, you'll have a buildup of all of this black clay, and that's going to be difficult to work with after. So every time you scrape, go ahead and pick that up and remove it with the tip of your fingers. Okay, this is looking pretty good for me. Oh, looks like I missed this edge here. All right. Now, before we put the hole in the hat, I want you to try and kind of lift your little hat. Just try to gently pull it away from the parchment. So you'll notice that I'm placing the skewer flat against the parchment paper and I'm pushing under. You can do every corner, and once it's pretty much off, you can use your fingers to completely lift it. And since you have it in your hands, don't be afraid to kind of even further smooth out those edges with your fingertips. That's the great thing about polymer clays. You can really manipulate it, have fun with it, and hey, if you're not happy with it, you have a lot more clay to do it again. All right, so I'm just gonna place my hat back on the parchment paper because now we have to cut out the little hole where the string will be. You should see a tiny small circle cutter in your kit. Now, the smaller the cutters, sometimes the more difficult they are to work with. So we're gonna dip our circle cutter into the cornstarch, give it a little tap to get rid of the excess. So it should look something like this, okay? Now we're going to cut out the area for the string. Since this can work a little bit differently for you, if you're going to place his hat, I'm going to put this down for a second to explain, but if you're going to place his hat crooked, like the pictures that I posted are, you're going to want to do the hole maybe towards the center, right? Because that's the center of the ornament. If you want to place his hat right in the center of his head, that's totally fine. You're going to place that hole right in the center of the hat, and if you tilt it the other way, on the other corner of the hat. I hope that makes sense. So I'm going to place my hat, the hat on the snowman a little bit crooked. So if I want that to be centered with a snowman, I'm going to want my circle in this area here. So that is where I'm going to cut out my circle. Now, the best thing or the best way to use this is to go ahead and place your fingers on the edges of your little hat. Press down the cutter where you want the hole and twist. Okay. It should come out and be inside of the cutter. If it isn't, the cornstarch should have made it so that you can use your skewer to dig out that circle, or alternatively, you can lift and then push it out with your fingers. Do what you need to do to get rid of that little circle. Now, that's okay that there's cornstarch there. We're just going to use our fingers to wipe. You can even use your skewer to clean out that cornstarch. I'm not too concerned about the cornstarch. If you have a lot left over once you're baking, you can also wash it with some mild soap and water after it's baked and cured. Now, since I have it in my hands, I'm going to go ahead and use a skewer to just clean up the circle on the inside. There was just a couple of jagged edges from that cutter. So there we go. Now, if you're going to get ready to use your circle cutter again, you want to make sure you clean it out, right? So the other side of your skewer, the flat part, should fit perfectly in your cutter so that you push it out, okay? And now we have that little piece that was stuck in there, and our cutter is ready for use again. All right, perfect. So now we have our hat. It should have a little hole wherever you decided to place it. And before we place it on our snowman, just make sure that you take some time and remove any excess cornstarch from where you're going to be sticking your hat. That just means going ahead and placing your finger and scraping it, you know, from side to side very gently without deforming your snowman. And we're going to place the hat onto the head. Now again, I'm going to put mine a little tilted. And just make sure that you have a good amount of the hat's brim on his actual head. And press, press, press to make sure it's on there nicely. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. And obviously, since we're placing a piece of clay on another piece of clay, you will have this unevenness here. That's totally fine. Just feel free to flatten the rest of it down so that it bakes the way that you want it to. All right, so there is our little snowman with his hat. Now we can move on to the features of the face and the scarf. And now again, we've provided you with lots of materials, so you can really add a lot more to your snowman. I'm going to show you just a basic face, little buttons, and his scarf, but you can totally get creative, mix your clay colors, add more detail. That's the fun part about working with polymer clay. All right, so the first thing I want to add is his nose, because that usually gives me a good indication as to where the rest of his features go. Now you have a nice portion of orange clay. I'm not going to need this much clay to work with, so we're just going to start with a little piece. But first, you'll notice probably that your hands look like this, so let's go ahead and wash them. All right, my fingers are nice and clean. So let's go ahead and grab a tiny little bit, and I mean tiny little bit, of that orange clay. All right. I probably have the size of a pea in my hand, and you're not even going to need this much, but it is a good amount to work with. All right, so very little. So what you're going to do, since we're rolling out kind of a carrot shape, you're going to put your your orange clay on your parchment, any corner where you have some space, and you want to start rolling it into the shape of a worm. Okay. So again, his nose is going to be rather small, so we're going to make this super tiny. And as you'll notice, the edge here is getting pointy, and that's because I'm focusing my pressure as I'm rolling right on the edge to get that little nice point of his nose. And then I'm going to keep rolling the rest of it. So this looks like a good size. Go ahead and grab your handy dandy skewer and cut the clay on the tip. Now I'm probably making it the size of a grain of rice, and you'll be able to adjust because we're going to fix it. So now that I cut out my little piece, I'm going to grab it off the edge and just kind of work the other side that I cut to round it out and make it nice and smooth again, because it did get a little messed up with the skewer. So you should have something that looks like this. Right, so it looks like a carrot. One side is a little more round, one edge is a little pointier. Now the best way to put your carrot nose on your snowman is you can, if you're looking for more precision at least, you can use your skewer. So I'm going to go ahead and poke my carrot. So I'm going to go ahead and poke my carrot nose so that it is on the tip of my skewer. And then you can really look to see if you want to make it smaller or if you want to place it now. I'm going to go ahead and place mine. So the best way to do that, since it's on there, you can do it that way where I just kind of tapped it and it came off because it wasn't really stuck on the skewer. But usually you can also just place it and then hold it down with your finger and then slide the skewer out. So I'm going to go ahead and just rotate the carrot, the little nose, till I'm happy with it. If it lifts off, that's totally okay. Just use your finger to put it back down. That looks good to me. I like the placement there. And then you can either use your finger to push down the nose, or you can also use the back of the skewer stick to gently press it. Little taps, baby taps, okay? Be very gentle. All right, so now we have our nose. We can move the orange away. I'm not going to be using the orange for my snowman anymore, so that goes there. Next, we're going to work on the 2 eyes and the 4 circles for his mouth. And we're going to do the buttons later because we want to do the scarf first. So here is some of the extra of the black. Grab again, probably the size of a pea. You're not going to need very much. And if you want this time, you can roll it into a snake on your palm first because we're going to be using very little of this black. You should have something that looks like this. go ahead and place it on your parchment so you can work with it. Now the best way that I have found to make little circle details like we're going to do for the eyes and the mouth is to use your skewer to pinch off pieces. That way they're pretty even. So I'm going to just make sure I have a section of this little snake that's pretty even in as far as the width goes. Just like that. You'll notice that this front part's pretty even and the back part's a lot thicker. So just make sure you have enough, and then go ahead and start by pinching off a little portion, and then you can roll it in your fingers to make sure that you have a smooth little ball. And again, this is going to depend on how big you want to make the features. It's all up to you. I want some precision with placing my eyes, so I'm going to pinch it onto the edge of my skewer and use that to put it down. Now if it doesn't come off, you can gently move your skewer around, or again you can use your finger, your other hand, to tap it down. Now I have my little eyeball there. It's not very secure though, so we're going to take the back end of that skewer stick and then press it down to flatten it out onto the clay. Okay, now we're going to make the other eye. So grab about the same amount of clay and roll it in between your fingers again until you have a round ball. I'm going to use my skewer to place it, so I'm going to push it onto the tip of my skewer and then place the other eyeball and then press down to make the eyes. And if you're not comfortable using the skewer, the other edge of the skewer, you can totally use your fingers to flatten that out. All right, so now we have our two eyes. I'm going to go ahead and do the 4 black circles for the mouth. Now when it comes to the mouth, it's a little easier to do the circles without pressing them down and kind of place them first before you do that final squish to push it onto the clay. So I'm going to start by placing them first. All right, so before we do the squish, I'm just going to move around the little circles we've made for his mouth until I'm happy with the placement of them. All right, so that looks pretty good to me there. I'm happy with that. So once you've placed them, place the little circles where you want them, go ahead and flatten them out with the other side of your skewer, or alternatively, you can push them down with your finger, okay? Either one works. I just find that this gives me a little more precision for each of them. And it lets me really handle the squish a little bit better. There we go. That's perfect. Yay. Okay, so now we're going to move on to his scarf. The scarf is a little bit more technical. It's a little bit different. So go ahead and rip off a piece of that red clay. This is the size probably of a gummy bear. And we're going to make a snake of this too. So roll it in between your hands if you want to get it started. That looks, let me go ahead and move the rest of this stuff so we can work with this parchment. And you know, you obviously have some black from the black clay, so if you want to just give that a wipe with your fingers to get rid of it. But we are going to add some texture to this scarf, so you shouldn't be able to see anything if it picks up any of that black. So now I'm just working on making sure that this entire piece of red is pretty even. This is a small snowman, so we won't need a big scarf for this little guy, but I do want it to be as even as possible. So I'm just kind of working with these pieces, or with this piece of clay, until it's pretty even. This looks a little bit thicker here. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this off so I can keep working on my piece of parchment and it doesn't move over. All right, now here is gonna be the trick for this. You wanna get it as big or as wide as your piece of parchment on this side. So this is 4 by 6, you want it at least 4 inches, right? This is definitely big enough for this little dude. Okay, so the way that I did this is by checking. See, it's just a little bit bigger. That's totally fine. Now you're gonna cut this in half because we're gonna give him 2 different sides of his scarf, okay? Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to attach the scarf to his neck on the side, and then we're gonna have all of this to play with on top, okay? So if you saw that, I just picked up this piece. This part's already flat because I flattened it with the skewer when I cut it in half. You can totally leave it that way. That's actually gonna help. I'm gonna pick that up on that squished end, and I'm gonna place that on his neck. You can totally just use your nail, your finger to squish that and make sure it's attached, okay? So now you have an attached half of a scarf. We're gonna do the same if you want to kind of perfect that point on the other piece, and then flatten that piece again a little bit. That's the side that this is the side that we use the skewer on. Do the same thing, and you can use your nail, or you can even use your skewer, your handy dandy skewer, to push that up against his neck and make sure it's really on there. Okay, so now that you have your 2 pieces attached, you actually can play around with this. This is pretty long. This is a pretty long scarf. We don't need it to be this long, but that's gonna be totally up to you. I highly suggest that you kind of do your loops or your designs before you cut any excess off. So I'm gonna show you how to make a really simple little loop. Go ahead and grab the half of the scarf with your right hand and the other half with your left. You're going to bring the piece with in your right hand over across his belly, across his body. And then you're gonna pull the other piece over to the other side, okay? Now, I like for the scarf to kind of fit completely on the snowman. So I'm gonna go ahead and pinch off some of the excess. So since I want this to stay on, I don't want this long piece here, I'm gonna pick this up and pinch it where I'd want it to end, okay? All I did was cut it off with my fingers, and then I'm gonna pinch it to flatten it out. So this piece is gonna stay there. That's where I want it to end up. That's where it's gonna live. Now I'm gonna wrap this other piece over. So go ahead and pick up the other piece and then bring it over. Make sure this one stays down. You could even hold your finger down. And then bring that knot to the other side. So we're not really creating a knot, but we are just kind of wrapping the scarf around his body. Now again, I want this piece to stay on here. This is too long for me. I'm gonna go ahead and pinch off the excess. Just like that. Pick that up and make it pointy, and then flatten it there. All right, so now he's wearing his scarf. I love the way that looks. Now, so before we add our little detail with the skewer, go ahead and press down your scarf so it stays in its place exactly where you want it to be. Perfect. Now we're going to add some detail to the scarf by using the pointy end of our skewer. Let me remove the excess here, and I'm going to show you. All I'm going to do is poke little bits onto the scarf to add some texture. You can do this lots of different ways. You can do a lot of texture. You can do a little bit, but I just wanted to show you up close what I'm doing, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and do that to all of the scarf so it looks a little bit like it's made of cloth, and you can do it any way that you like. You can also go without this and just make sure it's nice, that the clay is nice and squished on him. But this serves 2 purposes. It's giving us some design on our snowman. It's also making sure that this red clay is not going to move when baking in the oven, okay? So I'll do the same thing here, making sure I still have that detail that his little scarf has been swooped around his neck, okay? And once you're happy with it, you can stop, just making sure that the clay is nice and pressed down. Lovely. All right, so all we have left are his last little buttons on his body. So go ahead and grab that excess black clay. You're only gonna need a very little bit, so I have a tiny little bit in my hand. Roll it up again, making sure it's nice and even. Place it on your parchment sheet and go ahead and pinch off those buttons. And I'm placing them the same way that I did his mouth and the rest of his features. So picking up a little bit, placing it down with my skewer, and I'm going to do that 2 more times. All right, so now you can move around your buttons until you're happy with the placement. That's totally going to depend on you. You can even add more of the buttons, but I'm pretty happy with the way that they're placed there. So I'm going to go ahead and use a flattened of my skewer stick again to push that black clay into the snowman. Go for it. All right, so we have the 2 eyes, the carrot nose, the mouth, the scarf, and the 3 buttons. We have our little hat, and we've cut out our hole. So now you're actually ready to bake. So make sure you remove any other pieces of clay that you're not using anymore. Put that all together. Make sure your piece of parchment is clean. So now all you need to do is pick up your piece of parchment paper and place it on a baking sheet. You're going to bake your ornament at 250 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes. Please make sure to double check the temperature on your oven. It is possible to burn polymer clay and you don't want to do that. So low temperature, 250 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes only. When you remove your baking sheet from the oven, please make sure to let your piece cool completely before handling it, because polymer clay is soft when it is out of the oven, so it is possible to mess up your piece. So let it cool completely. And another tip that I can offer is to make sure that your room is well ventilated. So you might want to crack open a window, turn on the fan when you open your oven with your polymer clay piece. All right, so I'm going to put this in the oven and I'll be back to show you how to attach the ribbon to finish your ornament. All right, so I am using one of the first ornaments that I made. This is another one. It's been baked, it's cool to the touch, and so now I can work with it. I'm gonna show you how to attach that ribbon. So here is my little ornament. Go ahead and grab one of those 12-inch pieces of red ribbon, and I'm gonna show you how to attach it to your ornament. So first, you're gonna want to make a knot at the tip. So go ahead and fold it in half and make a simple knot by wrapping the piece of ribbon around your fingers, just like this. And then remove your fingers from the inside, but still hold on to that little tip there and push the rest of that ribbon through. So it should look like that. Now before you pull and tighten it completely, you can adjust your knot. Try to get this knot at the very end of your piece. That looks good to me. So once you're happy with the placement, go ahead and pull on both edges tightly to tighten your ribbon. Now to attach our little ornament, you want to grab the ribbon. Make sure you have the edge folded like this. It's just going to be easier to push it through. Go ahead and push it through the circle that you've made. So it should look like that. Now you want to grab the end that you've tied and put it through the loop. And then grab the end that you tied and pull. Be gentle. You can rock back and forth to make sure you get a tight fit. And that's it. You've completed your Maravilla Maker Snowman Ornament Kit. Let's see how it looks on the tree. You're all done. We hope you had a blast making your ornament. Please feel free to drop a review about your experience, and we hope to see you again next time. Happy holidays.